welcome everyone. Tonight we have the public hearings on the school department public hearing budget, the town public hearing budget, and the finance committee will present a report. Make a motion to open the public hearing.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And now I'll turn it over to Ms. Sapala. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. President, and members as well. My yearly visit to you in a formal way, although we certainly attend many meetings together and work together on all of the issues of the town and school and financing and improving our town. So I'm going to get right to it. This is our budget for this year, $27,738,098, an increase of $357,882 with a 1.31% increase. A discussion that we've had for quite some time and that I just heard the council having is that $357,000. And the council is wrestling, I understand, with how to fund that. But I'm just going to give you a little background about the formation of our budget so that you understand our thinking in the process. If you take a look at last year's listing of how our budget was funded as compared to this year, we are looking for that additional appropriation to come from the town. Non-local revenue is another name for state aid, and you'll see that we expect a slight increase this year. We will utilize $700,000 from our fund balance, as we have over a period of every year that I've been here, and this is my 8th budget to you. Just like the town, we look at our WB, which is our health insurance program, and we also take from that if there is any available surplus. And we're making a recommendation, instead of the $300,000, to look at $200,000. And I know that we've discussed that in the past. In fact, Ms. Hagopian has asked us about that in the past. This year, Alan Lord, who is the new director, is asking us to look at possible rate changes this year or next. So when you're looking at a rate change, which you really don't want to have to send on to your employees, you look at your fund balance as another way to manage that. So we would like not to have to increase the copay and co-share for our employees so that we are looking at having a more reasonable figure in our WB transfer. Medicaid is level, and other revenue is slightly up. That other revenue comes from a couple of sources. Our transportation department is able to charge for the charter schools and other rentals that they have. We also have fees from our retirees. They pay us an administrative fee for the management of their insurance program, and so that's another fee we pick up. And we also have a preschool that we collect revenue from. Any questions? Please, I'd like this to be as interactive as possible, but also not take a great deal of your time. I call this the tale of two budgets because our original school department budget was a level funded appropriation. We were not looking for an additional $357,000. It was very clear to those of us in the education department that you had to wrestle with pension. So my directive to all of my departments was level funded. We must come in and ask this town for not one more cent than last year. But we also were true to our commitment to capital. If you've watched our budgets over the years, we dedicate 2.5% to 3% of our total budget to capital. That's what's recommended by the Department of Ed to keep your buildings at a strong level. So our original budget gave us a capital improvement plan and did not ask you for any additional dollars. However, the week of our presentation to the town council, I met with the brand new finance director. I think she had been there for a week or maybe 10 days at the most, and our still very new town manager. And they told us that there was a different method that they were utilizing than Don Goodrich had utilized about how to fund the ARC. If you recall, last year Don had an amount of money that he put towards the ARC. It wasn't distributed and charged to school department versus the town. It was just an amount of money. And just before he left, at our December joint meeting, he said, when Karen and I checked, it was probably going to be done that way, and he gave us an idea of what the figure would be, and it was very similar to last year as far as it impacted us. This was a different way that this town manager and finance director wanted to develop it. We had no problems with that analysis that they did. We wanted to support them. We asked how they manage this issue, and they suggested looking at our capital, which is exactly what we did. And they really wanted the increased benefits to be charged properly to the benefit line at 38%. So when we did that, that was an additional $720,000. I already had a budget all done already, which had already cut 7.6 FTE employees. So to add another $700,000 in that last week was extremely difficult. So the second budget, the one you're seeing tonight, reduced our capital by 60%, and we made a strategic decision not to do the funding of the capital like we showed you. No $655,000 capital plan. Instead, we determined that our capital would be only $275,000. We would not fund it through our general fund. We would only fund it through reserve monies that we had. Any questions on that, committee? So I really do call it two budgets, and I just respectfully want to say that we were happy to cooperate with the town manager and finance director, but we had a balanced budget with no increase. So here's this shortfall that we talked about. And so, you know, this was the result even after we took a 60% cut on capital and only funded capital through reserve. We still were short this. And the town manager said, town fiscal director said, let's see what we can do for you. We will put it in the budget as more of a town-funded item like it was the year before. Any questions on that, committee? We appreciated it, but we understood that it might be difficult for the council to support. So, I'm not going to go through every single line item in this budget, but I am circling and identifying a few that I think your attention should be directed to. First of all, salaries. Remember, I think this is quite significant, that the school department is able to meet all of our contractual expectations and still have a decrease in salaries. Our contractual agreements would have been with the support contract, the teaching contract, and all of our administrators. Raises were between 1% and 2% according to that. If we had funded our full complement of current employees, that number that now has a decrease of 136,000 would have increased by 400,000. That was the cut that the school department made to be able to come to you with a zero increase. And so I think this is quite significant that we've made cut in employees to have a decrease in salary, because you know that it's salary that drives most of our budget. Just take a look at those numbers. $16 million of our $27 million is salaries. We knew we had to go there. Secondly, here's the increase, this huge increase in, and just a little bit more about staffing. I just want to go back. So we made 7.6 cuts, and this is that chart showing you where those cuts are, the majority of them at our high school. And a couple in transportation as special education children age out. It's balanced. It's supported by the principals. It was hard news, but it was the way to balance this budget. Remember, that tale of first budget that we were able to save probably in the vicinity of $500,000 when you take a look at all of these areas. Any questions on this, committee? This is significant. This is the biggest change in employees since I've been here. We have never cut 7.6 people in 1 year.
And where's the cut in transportation, Kathy? The transportation, what does that mean? The two positions, what?
One driver and one monitor.
So one bus?
And it's special ed children aging out and not needing to be transported any longer out of district. All the rest are teaching positions, teaching or teacher assistant. So you've frequently asked me about enrollment. So next year's enrollment will be 12 fewer students at the elementary school, 9 fewer students at the peer school, and no change in enrollment at the high school. So you might say, then how did you do this? How did you cut 5.1 positions? As I stand before you other years, I try to explain that when you don't have a significant core number, you can't cut a classroom. Sometimes these students are distributed across many grade levels. And unless you have that core of 20 at an elementary school, for example, you can't cut a teacher, you cut sections. So over the last few years, our high school enrollment has been dropping. But In that world of scheduling, which is very difficult in a small school, you have to kind of wait and see and adjust. So finally, we're at that adjustment point. Although there'll be no more students or no fewer students in that school next year, as we looked at class size right now, we see that we can make those cuts. 2 of those cuts are teacher assistants. So 2 of the 5.1, just like I said to you, special ed children are aging out. 2 of them are teacher assistants. The other 3 are from the teaching staff. And it's portions of a teacher or a program change. For example, when you look at our reading scores, we have outstanding, excellent reading scores at the high school. The need for a full-time reading teacher is not there any longer. It is simply not justified. So we are able to, sometimes after a couple of years, make the cut that you might have wanted in previous years. Here's the year we can do it. We're comfortable with it. Hard in scheduling, but comfortable. So we'll have 21 fewer students district-wide next year. I think that's very comparable given the cut in salaries. 21 students, and $18,000 per pupil. That's the almost $500,000 that I said we're saving in salary. Any questions on that committee? I need to credit my principals, my director of finance, every single department with being able to make these cuts and still deliver an excellent education. But that was the directive. That was our goal, to come to you and have that be a 0. Here's the issue on benefits. This was a huge increase that happened in that discussion that week in February. And just to break it down for you, most of it is to fulfill the pension arc. Some of it is for the Affordable Health Care Act, the increased costs that we have. I'm sure the town has something similar. It's based on the number of employees. I'm going to bring one more item to your attention on our increase-decrease sheet, and that's our final one, section 5900, which is called Other. It's where we fund capital, other post-employment benefits, which is our retirement, health care, and food service. This budget is a very low one. It's only $142,000, down $350,000. Remember I told you we cut our capital, like the town, so we did that cut. And what we are doing, though, with our 142, it's important that you know that we are continuing to fund OPEB. We are committed to good financial planning. Our post-retirement benefit is a very defined benefit. It has an end in sight. It's only 2 years for a family or 4 years for a single, but we need to continue to put monies there. And with this $100,000, we will pass the $1 million mark. And so we fund it as we go, and we also have a pool. So it was very important to us in our financial planning to continue to fund OPEB. Food service, unfortunately, we had a loss in food service. We have a very small number of students who actually buy lunch in our school department. We are a school department of people who bring their own lunch, families who prepare their own lunches for their families, so we don't make a lot of money in our food service. However, I have really good news that we just went out to bid, and I think that we'll be dealing with this through our new bid, and that we will not have to be looking at this kind of an expense to throw back into the program. So, I just want to reiterate that in our entire budget, the biggest increases and decreases are salary decrease, increase in benefit, and a decrease in capital. That's how we got to where we are. Again, I'll stop for questions or I'll keep on going.
Kathy, I do have a question, actually. If we could go back to the pension, I just picked up something I have to keep reminding myself. So I clued in.
This one?
Yes. This pension pickup is on non-teacher pension.
Correct. I'll tell you who those are.
How many people?
Almost 90.
90.
90. So I can give you a breakdown. I thought you might ask. 29 teacher assistants, 22 transportation workers, 19 maintenance and grounds people, 12 clerks, and my other category is about 10, so I think it comes to about 90, 10 administrators who are not teachers. Does that come to about 90?
Ish, yeah.
And we have, just to finish that off, we have 152 teachers. So there is, the state pension system also has some adjustments for pension, but actually they were not huge increases this year, were they, Karen? They were quite reasonable. I can get that exact figure for you.
No, just,
We're hearing next year it may be higher, but it all depends on which version of the state pension system goes through.
thanks.
Okay, I'm just going to, you have a folder in front of you, committee, that I should have probably started with, but this is very hard to read, but your own copy is in the blue folder. So there's a dark blue folder on your table. I think you've been following along with the PowerPoint. That's on one side, but this capital plan is certainly within the folder. What's also in the folder is an executive summary from me, which I think if you sit back and read that, it's going to give you a good picture of the entire budget, our thinking and our philosophy and how we came to what we wanted. So I hope that the executive summary is helpful.
I'm sorry, Carrie, I just wanted to ask you one question. You were talking about cutting TAs as well. You cut 2.
Yes.
Can you just define what a teaching assistant does for the community and the
Okay.
council?
Teaching assistant may be called a paraprofessional, very connected to students. So a special ed student may have an adult who is with that child to assist that child to be in the least restrictive environment possible, our school, rather than some other setting, which might be out of our school and in a specialized school setting. So there are children who have their own teaching assistant. There are teacher assistants in particular classrooms. We have a self-contained classroom, 5 or 6 children. Several of them might be in wheelchairs. There might be a teaching assistant assigned to the room to also allow that child to access the curriculum in the best way possible because they need that help in order to do that. So that's what a teaching assistant is. And we had quite a few at the high school in the self-contained room, but 2 of those students are graduating. So that's why we can make that cut. Those students are going out into the community, but you change their type of assistance. You may not send a one-on-one with that child because they're 18. You might send them to a program that we pay a tuition to, and the teaching assistant is taken care of through that program.
Right. Do you have teacher assistants in regular education classes, or are they predominantly for the children that have disabilities?
The only place we still have them is kindergarten, and they're there for perhaps a half a day at the most, but it's really just for special education. Now, we also have a couple of people who work in the cafeteria during lunchtime, but they are in a different category.
Thanks.
Not part of the pension, only put in a few hours a day.
Thank you.
So this is our capital plan. And if you just, as you're looking at this later on, I've circled just the year for you to look at, 2014-15. And the bottom line is we're really looking at just a I can't see the bottom of it right here, but I think it's $257,000 total. But take a look at our other years. We have spent more and want to spend more to be able to continue to support our schools in the manner in which they are accustomed. And it really has made a huge difference as we have continued the work of the bond issue from 6 years ago. So we will fund this capital plan from our reserve. How do we have a capital reserve? We get a capital reserve from monies from the Rhode Island Department of Education for previously approved projects, that if they support the project, that they will reimburse us once we spend our dollars. So every June, we get a check, which kind of builds that up. And we have enough money in that fund to fund all of this year's capital completely without having to ask the town for any dollars. So we only identified those things which are most important. Now, this will put us back. I heard a phrase, in the last meeting, we don't want to be the council that somebody blames for not doing the roads because you funded the ARC. I don't ever want to be retired, sitting in Matunic, enjoying myself, reading about the superintendent who didn't support the buildings of Narragansett and put them into this position that, you were in about 10 years ago. So we've been very committed to capital, and we're very happy that we do have the funds to be able to support this small capital budget this year, but we don't want to continue in that small way. Any questions, committee, thus far? All right, I'm close to the end, so just beg your indulgence for a little bit more. So so many of us receive our information from the newspaper, and I've been reading a lot about the $500,000 surplus, which committee members, council members have wondered if it could be accessed to help in that $372,000 shortfall. So I just want to, for the record, clarify what this is. That was the answer to a question when Karen Hagan was asked, what do you think your surplus will be this year? On a $27 million budget, a less than 2% surplus is very common. In fact, take a look at your own surplus. I'm sure you have some dollars that you're not expending in your current budget. Every year, you take those dollars and you move them into a fund balance. So Karen was asked, what do you think this year's surplus would be? And in her estimation, looking at our monthly bills, she thinks it's about $500,000. How do we have that? People say, how can you have that? It's two lines, teacher reserve and special education emergencies. We didn't need to tap either of those this year. You'll see them in the budget, and the full budget's in your packet. Teacher reserve is on page, Karen, you just want to pull the pages so people can see. You'll see teacher reserve, she'll give you the page, and that's at $200,000, and special ed's at about $150 in terms of emergencies. So when you have to plan very carefully and make sure you have those dollars, but if you don't need them, they become part of your surplus. So Karen, just page 2 is teacher reserve up near the top, and special ed tuition is page 30. So you'll see those lines. So that's the $500,000 that we're talking about. That's this year's surplus, which would go into the fund balance. Now, I just want to remind you that fund balances are important. I think before I reached your meeting today, you were kind of talking about that. What does your audit show you? The audit would tell you, and your auditors would tell you, that you need to have a certain percentage of your total budget in a fund balance. That's what's healthy. That's what gets you your bond rate, one of the pieces that gets you your bond rating. We agree that we need a fund balance, and we do have a fund balance in the school department. It's right in the audit, but it needs to be reasonable, and it needs to be utilized in a particular way. As I told you earlier in the meeting, we have a fund balance, and we pull from that fund balance every single year to balance the budget. And I went back over the past 6 years, and we've pulled between $658 and $700 every year since I've been here. So that $500,000 that we have left here, that I mentioned earlier, will become part of next year's fund balance that we may be able to pull from. Because remember, we want to pull $700,000 from the fund balance. So it's almost as if your surplus of one year becomes your fund balance withdrawal of the next year. Now, we do have some dollars that we have had from the past, and certainly the school department has a plan for that. And yes, we have 2 major projects on the docket for the future. We've been saving our fund balance. We believe in saving the dollars to be able to provide for enhancements. And so our general fund balance, in addition to helping us plug the budget, will help to pay for these 2 major initiatives. I believe that our fund balance will pay for the entire greenhouse. And we haven't spoken a lot about the greenhouse, but it's that academic program that Mr. Wojciechowski reminds me, we've got to talk about academics. Academics. It will bring career and tech certification to our agriculture program. Education Department, Career and Tech. I think it's going to be fantastic. And if you've been to our greenhouse, it really does need a repair. It's outside of the school. It doesn't have safe access for the students. And we have a wonderful plan for the greenhouse to be paid for with our fund balance when that plan is up. So we look at our fund balance very seriously and utilize it very well. And so before I go on, are there any questions about that? I'm just once again showing you that we will use $700,000 from the fund balance to be able to plug this budget. We would like to keep the rest of those dollars for these 2 activities. And in the council being very generous and supporting a $1.8 million bond issue to go to the voters, I probably stood before you and I tried to advocate for the lowest number possible. I know we need the lowest number with the voters, and that the more we can use from our fund balance to pay for this, the better. And that is our plan. And then I'll close with just some reminders of who we are. Most recent NECAP scores has 90% of our students at or above proficiency in reading in all of our grades 3 to 8 and 11. Not to compare, but that puts us immediately behind Barrington and East Greenwich. They're at 92%, we're at 90%. And that's what the Department of Ed charts show. Now this number isn't quite as stellar, that 76% of our students in grades 3 to 8 and grade 11 are proficient. But when you look at a state average of 54, 76% is very high. That 3 out of 4 of our students are proficient in mathematics on the NECAP. Recent accomplishments are really worth noting. I could have gone on for pages, but most recently, 3 of our high school students won a C-SPAN award, and Sheldon Whitehouse joined us last week to present that. Next week, C-SPAN comes to present, an award. They did a documentary on the rising sea level in Narragansett, the climate changes, and that interaction. It was fantastic. We have an exceptional number of students from our high school and peer school going to National History Day. They were the state winners, about 8 of them going to the University of Maryland in June. We're very proud of their accomplishments in history. Our college acceptances continue to be among the most prestigious colleges in the state. Yes, sports is important to our students, and we've had great championships, 5 last year and 2 so far this year. But one of my most favorite accomplishments is where our theater program and our music department has gone, because that's near and dear to my heart. Last year, we were, our middle school for the play The Wiz was chosen the most outstanding middle school play in all of New England. And now they're in competition for Shrek as well, in that same level competition. Their theater work is outstanding. And our high school band also received outstanding, and chorus received outstanding, the highest ratings last week before vacation at Riema. So music and theater are equally important to our athletics. And I've just been informed that our Teacher of the Year is now a finalist for Rhode Island Teacher of the Year. Sue Sabella is one of the very few people still being considered, and I think she will be the Rhode Island Teacher of the Year, which would be another great coup for Narragansett, and we'll hear about that in a week or so. So I may be back with some really good information for you. So I'm going to close with a few things. I'm not embarrassed to say that I believe we're an asset to this town. I believe that if people are here because they have found work here and want to live in this great community and can find a place, they are very satisfied and more than satisfied with the schools. I really believe we're a partner as well. If you heard my message at the beginning, I knew we needed to not ask you for extra money. We did ask you for extra money as we worked with the town manager, but our plan was to come in at 0. And I do believe that we can continue to work with you to help lead this town to growth, to continued improvement, to the financial management that we have of our retirees and our contracts in terms of benefits. I think we have some great examples that can help save the town dollars, and I hope that you'll consider that as you consider our budget. We're going to close with a few points from our chair, and then I certainly will be back for any other questions you have.
Great. Thank you, Kathy. Thank you for having us. I have 4 slides, I think, that are going to take about 4 minutes. And then I'm the very last speaker for the school department. I've been on the school committee for the past 5.5 years, and over the past 4 budget seasons, the school department has only received 1 increase for $63,000. To offset increases that we've had in health insurance costs, pension contributions, and contractual obligations, to be able to stay level funded over those years, we've had to make very difficult reductions in staff, cut our capital projects just like the town has. There we go. Thank you. So you've already heard that our school budget for this coming year, it includes 7.6 reductions in staff. And I just want to remind the council that over the past 8 years, with our projected cuts, including our projected cuts for next year and the past 8 years, we've cut 32 employees in the school department. That's a significant number of cuts in 8 years. Want to talk a little bit about capital? The school department and the school committee, we feel very strongly that we have a responsibility to the taxpayers to maintain and protect the town's assets. We feel that we need to take a balanced approach to funding our pension obligations and continuing to protect and grow the town's assets. The school department is more than willing to partner with the town to find this balanced solution to address the pension crisis and address our capital needs. I want to talk a little bit about funding for the athletic complex. I've been a part of our school building committee for the past 5 years, and each year this building and grounds committee really works on long-term planning, and it prioritizes the yearly projects that need to be done. Over the past 4 years, I've also worked closely with school and town employees and residents who volunteer to come up with a long-term recreation plan. I know that you all have heard about our recreation needs assessment and master plan that we had done by Gale Associates in 2010, and then the subsequent plans that have been made for the athletic complex based on this master plan. As Kathy mentioned, the school department's been setting aside a portion of funds from our fund balance for the past 4 years to put toward this project. I want to give you a little update on our fundraising. There, nope. That one. Oh, you know what? I should do that. Okay. Thank you. Okay. So our fundraising to date for the athletic complex, we're at $670,000. We're going to find out in a few weeks if we're going to receive the $400,000 grant that we applied for from DEM, and I really hope that I get to come back in a few weeks in front of this council and recognize our lead grant writer, Nancy DiNuccio, Steve Wright, Mike DeLuca, Teresa Tanzi, and Dan Barry, who helped us put together this grant. Last week, we also submitted a Champlin grant for $100,000. So I'm hoping that we're going to come back in the next few weeks, and we're going to be over the $1 million mark for fundraising, and we just now are launching our community fundraising phase. So I think that's a significant amount of donations we've had from our very generous community just in our major gift phase. So we're very excited about that. All right. All right, so my closing remarks, as Kathy said, the school committee was fully prepared to support a level-funded budget again. We supported the recommendation that was made by our town manager and our new finance director, who asked us to find that additional $721,000 for pension contributions. As you heard, this required us to make an additional $350,000 in cuts to capital, in addition to the reductions that we've already have made in staff positions and other capital projects. So respectfully, we ask that you support the budget that we passed in March, which includes that $721,000 in pension contributions. It includes the reduction of 7.6 school employees. It includes significant cuts to our capital plan, and it also includes significant cuts that we've made in individual school budgets and overall district expenses that have really been scrutinized per line item. So thank you. So at this time, if any of you have any questions for Kathy or I, we'd be happy to answer that.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
I think our next item is the town budget. Who'll make that presentation, Ms. Nolan or Ms. Kenyon? Thanks.
Do you need to close that?
Tonight,
I think, are we doing all the hearings at once in one public hearing session, or is it 3 separate?
we have two separate, were they separate, Ann?
May 5th, we're going to have another public hearing.
But I mean, this tonight.
Tonight. We have two separate public hearings.
So
We
should
have
we,
the school and then we have the town.
but can we keep it open as one, or should we separate should we close that public hearing and then open up a new one, or?
What do you say?
Yeah, probably should. Make sense?
You might want to ask questions on the school budget from the public
Right,
before you close.
correct. Any comments or discussion on the school budget? Professor Vengermish.
Right. Once again, you'd have to give the school department A+ for transparency. And I think that is vital. But this transparency should lead to some action from the council. Let's say we have 90 non-teachers in the art. and a cost of $721,000. This is a crying out for privatization. Now, we can't privatize for the upcoming budget year, that we know. This is a complex procedure. But $721,000 would be saved if we privatize. If we do what most communities in Rhode Island do, we privatize these functions. And I know this goes against our nature of being chums. I've said it many times. We want to be chums with all our employees. They're our friends. And I think this is understandable. It's good for morale, but at $721,000, it's time for some unchummy look at structural changes. And that word is privatization. Another term you can use is outsourcing. And because of the transparency, you have to give Kathy and her staff great credit. We see this. And it's time that we do something about it. Now, I do have another comment, and that there will be opposition to this bond issue. I plan to oppose the funds for the walking trail. This has nothing to do with education. This is a total waste. It may get a few votes on the bond issue, but we have many walking trails in Narragansett. This does not belong with the school and the school bond. And what the amount is, this has to end. This has nothing to do with education. So these are two comments that I think need to be made, but at the same time, you have to give the school department credit for transparency and for an attempt to make clear what this is, especially on the bond issue, because it's very good to see what the walking trail will cost. We haven't seen it from the jail. We will never see it from the library. This is transparency, but it allows you to say, why are we allocating funds to a park and rec function in the school department? And for this reason, I will be opposing the school bond issue. We've just got to realize that if we want a walking trail, fine, it does not belong in the school budget.
Thank you. Ms. Shebshelowitz.
For many years, I was very involved with all three schools from 1987 to 2001, when my youngest son graduated. I always supported the schools, but at this time, I do not support the school budget. I do not support spending all that money on turf fields and trails and improving the athletic fields to the point where they are, like Mr. Rinaldi was quoted in the paper as saying, making our school somewhat like a private school or something. Well, maybe he went to Rocky Hill. But a lot of people, we're here to support the public schools. And I don't feel that the town is really supporting seniors that are on fixed incomes. There are no children on my street, absolutely none. There are about 3 or 4 houses for sale. Many of the seniors talk about having to move out of town because they can't afford it. And I just feel like this luxury program that they are presenting is, even the high school principal did not support enlarging the agricultural program. We have Charahoe, and trying to import students so we can serve students from other areas. Why isn't the town more concerned with the quality of life for the residents that are here, including seniors? The library is used by all age groups and is very well used, and it's like there's no mention of the intellectual benefits of the library for lifelong learning for all families. And I just feel the tax increase is coming because of some wasteful spending, such as the $92,000 for the 10-year plan for Mr. DeLuca's office. I just can't even believe, as a nurse, you triage, you prioritize what's important. And I think you have to think of the whole community, not just the school community, when you make budget allocations to even the schools. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Wojciechowski.
I just want to publicly thank Superintendent Zapala for an excellent presentation, and obviously she's really on top of the finance situation. It's really a pleasure to have her here, and professionalism. One of the issues I want to talk about is fund balance. You know, I understand we have uses for fund balance, but we have one fund balance. The town fund, we need a town fund balance, fine. I can't understand why we need another fund balance for the school. If the school has an issue, they can come back and get some money out of fund balance. But for them to have their little kitty on the side for their projects, for fund balance, I don't see that right now. However, if we got a $700,000 fund balance, then that's what should be used for this $357,000 shortfall. They have a balance, use it right there. We don't need to come to the town for the money. You already got your fund balance, use it. It just sounds like it's a right place to be. Then we look at greenhouse. I like the idea of the greenhouse. It sounds like a good idea. It probably will, we could train some of our students to plant grass in this greenhouse. They could learn a little bit more about flowers, grass, and this kind of thing. And their knowledge could be used in taking care of the fields. You know, I learned that back in the 6th grade for the church. I used to plant grass around the church. So you learn how to plant grass, get the loom out there, and weed it, and fertilize it, and do what you had to do. So rather than us going out and getting these multi-million-dollar bond issues for fields out there, then let's have our children learn how to maintain, upkeep our fields out there. Let's give them a job, on-the-job training, if you will. So I suggest that we do that rather than go out for a multi-million-dollar issue. I'm so proud to see the fundraising and the grants of $1 million. It really speaks to the community spirit we have here, and we want to thank everyone that's involved in that. Also, that tells us we got to be responsible. Do one thing at a time. We don't need to go to bond issue, do everything. Oh, we need everything now. No, we don't need everything now. We've got this $1 million, maybe. Let's spend the $1 million on something we might need. Maybe the seats out there are not too good, and we need to do something because of a safety issue. But we have $1 million. We spend that $1 million for something that's really needed. Let's not just pile it on, so now we have to get a bond issue to do this. No. We pay as you go. That's a new thing today. The old days was a good idea to have mortgages and just get it now. I want a new car. I want a new house. I want all these things new on a loan. That whole idea is old. We don't do that anymore. We're trying to be fiscally responsible. As we get the money, we'll buy it. And not assume that automatically the taxpayer will come up. Somebody's going to come up with the money. We'll go out there and get these big plans, and we'll find the money. That's not the way to do it. Now let's find the money, go out there, ask for donations on these specific items that's not directly related to math and English and the basic core things that I think. I would like to, I feel bad that we are diluting, we're spending so much time on athletics. And what I would like to see is an 8-hour school day. An 8-hour school day. What I would like to see is a year-round school. I would like to see 4 weeks off, one in each season. So you'd have a winter week, a spring, autumn. So you have 4 weeks off. Other than that, you're going to school. They do it other places. They do it around the world. That would attract people here if that's what you want to do. If you want to attract people here, we have a school here that goes 8 hours a day, and they have 4 weeks off. So if somebody wants to go skiing, they go skiing. If they want to go, but that's the way to do it. That's how to attract people. Let's give them some quality. Let's give them a lot of education. Let's teach our children some basic things. And let's focus. 8-hour day, year-round school. My children constantly had a problem with loss in the summertime. You know, you have this long time. So now we gotta stay on top of our kids, make them read, so they don't have any loss, so when they come back in September. I don't want to deal with that, and I don't think we should have to deal with that. If they were going year-round school, they wouldn't have that summertime loss that you have to make up. So let's focus on that and a little less on the athletics. You know, when you get year-round school, maybe the last hour of school we could be in athletics out there doing what we have to do, not fields that we maintain. We need just a big change in our thinking right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Rogers.
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate my thanks to the superintendent and the school committee for a great job preparing their budget and trying to keep expenses under control. Good schools don't happen in a vacuum, so kudos to you. Quick question, maybe for Laura or our superintendent. I know this seems like chump change compared to the other expenses in the budget, but you know I'm a Republican, so I have to tick this box off. I noticed $85,000 in increased expenses because of the affordable, emphasis added, Affordable Health Care Act. So I imagine that number is going to spiral out of control over the next 5 years. And sort of federal money always comes with strings attached and sort of gives an unfunded mandate to the town. So is that just increases in premiums?
Actually, those are increases in fees, specific fees. One is a reinsurance fee, and one is a fee to fund education portion to research new ways of treating illness. So they're actually specific fees that we have to pay on a tax form to the government.
And the second number I noticed was, this is a scary number to me. I know we're transitioning from the kneecap to the park, and I know testing is a very controversial issue, and it's actually something that conservative Republicans like me actually really agree with many people in the teacher unions about. I'm very, very troubled by the imposition of some of these federal standards that are coming at us through the Common Core. And $91,818 in supplies and materials to transition from the kneecap to the park. That seems like a big number. Sadly, we could be fixing our schools and doing infrastructure repairs to our buildings. Doesn't the state help us with that? The commissioner decides the transition and then the town picks up the tab.
So that 91,000 that Meg is referring to, it's on the front page. Supplies and materials. Our increase this year is $91,000. Supplies and materials are more than, it isn't just the transition to park. So it is grass seed and trash removal, well, not trash removal, but the plastic bags we use for trash. It's books, it's materials, it's paper. It's many, many things. This is not just the transition to park. So I would say that the transition to park is a portion of that, but not the full 91,000, Meg. It's all of the supplies and materials in the entire school department, right from food service down to maintenance. So it's about a 7% increase. Some of it is park related, but that's mostly in terms of technology and the computers we've had to buy over the years to be ready for park. And yes, government has helped. We had Race to the Top, and it brought our district about $25,000 a year for 4 years, and that's gone now. And so you will see our curriculum budget
increased in all the schools because we still need to prepare the teachers to prepare the kids to take that test. A frustration that a lot of us feel.
Thank you. Looks like there's no further comment, so somebody can make a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. We'll now turn to the town budget. Take a break? Oh, take a 5-minute break, if that's all right, just for
Changeover.
a changeover. We'll meet back at 8:25.
No idea. She hides it well.
Welcome back, everyone. We will now move on to the town budget, the public hearing. Would someone like to make a motion to open the public hearing in the town budget?
I'll make that motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Ms. Nolan, the floor is yours.
I'm going to go over briefly just an overview of our budget for 2014, 2015. I arrived here in October 2013, and immediately I was faced with Mr. Goodrich, our finance director, announcing that he was leaving January 30th. When I started the hunt for a new town finance director, I really set my sights on hiring an accountant, somebody that had an accounting degree, and somebody who had a lot of experience in municipal finance. And that's what we did when we hired Ms. Kenyon, Laura Kenyon, as our finance director. She arrived here February 1st, 2014. So the fact that we have a budget tonight, that we're this far along in it, I want to point out to everybody is somewhat of a miracle. And I am very grateful for Laura and her competency. And she has assumed the financial reins in a time where we are under some economic urgency because of the state of Rhode Island, placing us in a critical status because of our underfunded pension system. So with this in mind, this is how we began to form our budget for 2014, 2015. And I've been doing this for nearly 25 years as a town manager now, and I know that the people of this town want to live with a very high standard of living. We have a very good standard of living in this community. And I think the challenge for us in the next decade is keeping the quality of life high while still protecting the taxpayer with as low rates as we can possibly do. So this is what we set out on. Now, one thing we had to do was fund the pension arc to 80% this year. We are currently at 60%, almost 60%. If we had been over 60%, we wouldn't have had the critical status. But we do have the critical status, and in that regard, we had to, before I got here, before Laura got here, the council passed a plan for the state, the FIP, and we promised that we would bring the budget up to 80% in 1 year and 100% next year. So with this in mind, we began looking at our budget and what could we do to keep the standard of living high but not hurt the taxpayers. We had a workshop this evening. We've had several, and we have been steadily bringing the budget down, especially in our capital expenses. We have cut our capital expenses from nearly $4 million last year to $536,000 this year. So we have cut off nearly over $3,300,000 from our capital expenses. We also had new assessment numbers just recently, which added a little more income into our ability to work with our revenue. We raised our collection rate to 98.5%, and tonight the council saw for the first time what that would do to us. We level funded our OPEB contribution, but we do have an OPEB contribution. And I would like to point out to everybody that the town of Narragansett did have an upgrade in its bond, from its bond service. Moody's upgraded us to AA. And yet they did note in giving us this new improved status that we had to take care of our pension obligations, and that's a caveat in there. So we knew exactly what we have to do to make this a budget that's reasonable, sustainable, and helps us set ourselves on an even keel for the next few years. We may be looking at a couple, 3 hard, maybe a little difficult years, but we see us coming out of it. We see Narragansett as being a fine community with a fine bond rating, and like I've said, a really good high standard of living. So our job in the next decade is going to be to keep it there. So we got our new assessments, we raised our collection rate, we level funded our OPEB contribution, We received raises in healthcare within the last couple of weeks. We had another 5% to add on to healthcare. Our insurance in general, that's all the other insurance that the town needs to buy, has been raised. We incorporated this into what we presented to the council tonight. Our electricity has gone up, as everybody says. You know what that's like. And because of the recent PUC agreement with United Water, we have a water increase, and it's substantial. All of our departments level funded or cut their budgets for 2014, 2015. Tonight, in our budget work session, we removed more capital. Like I said, we're down to $536,100 in capital. And we are currently conducting negotiations with two of our labor unions, one of them being our largest union. While we are not free to comment on what we're negotiating, you can be sure that we are trying for savings in health insurance and in pension, and that will reduce our OPEB in the end. I would like to say that the anticipated residential tax rate of this budget is up 2.3% to a tax rate of around 10.05 a year. And that's, in a nutshell, what this budget is about.
And we have a further budget meeting work session scheduled for May 5th, I believe, based on tonight, continued to discuss more changes potentially to see what we can get to.
We'll have a council work session before the regular meeting on May 5th, where you will have the second public hearing on the proposed 2014-15 budget.
And that's open to the public, as have the rest of them.
Absolutely. Yes, it is. I would ask Ms. Kenyon, is there anything that I should add?
No, covered it all.
Okay, thank you.
Any public comment or questions? Mr. Wojciechowski.
There's a few things I want to compliment our town manager about, and one of them is the town assessor. I hear she hired a part-time fella for a while on a town assessor, and it kind of opens the door on our thinking at contract labor. You know, hiring freeze. I heard her mention a hiring freeze in the past also, and I've been an advocate of that. We're in critical status. We're broke. We're broke, okay? So therefore, contract labor, you know, industry's been doing that years ago, 10, 15 years ago. They're out there looking for contract labor, you know, and especially, I think it really fits Narragansett because, you know, you have a need for a lot of services in the summer. And then for 9 months, the majority of the year, the 9 months, we're docile here. We don't need all that service. We only need the service in the summertime. That's when we're crowded. That's when there's people all over the place. So it fits very well that you would bring in contract labor in the summertime so that you wouldn't be burdened with the pensions and everything else that we got a problem with. And you don't need them here. And you know, I just look forward for her to find those areas where we can really utilize that idea of contract labor. It really made me feel good hearing that. I think also trucks, and I'm so happy that Councilman Doug mentions about trucks all the time. He always brings about trucks and stuff. Do we need stuff? Do we really need a lot more stuff? You know, we're not really going to add a lot more roads. Yeah, we're going to fix the roads we have, but how many more plows, how many more items, again, new. We need, I think we got a tree cutting truck, new tree cutting truck. I don't know, I seen it go around. I just look, do we really need that? Could we have hired that out somewhere, contract out, have somebody cut the tree rather than our own tree truck? It really looks nice. And the same thing for cleaning out the drains, I guess. Do we really clean out the drains all the time, all year long? Could we have contracted that out? It just seems... So obviously we got to have a freeze on all, we got to consider, we got to look back at our 5-year plan, if you will, and freeze everything. Look at that. Don't spend any money on trucks and items and computers. I heard about computers. unless we absolutely have to have it. Do we really have to have it? Can we get along without it? And maybe, let's just postpone it. Let's not say don't have it. Let's just say 2 or 3 years down the road, we'll reconsider it again. When like she says, that it sounds like we're going to have a reprieve, another 3 years of this austerity, and then we'll have a better time. Then we can reconsider all these purchases. So stop all the purchases unless it's an emergency. If there's no emergency, we don't need it. And that goes along with the bonds. Is there an emergency that makes us have to fix the police side? That police station looked pretty nice, I'll tell you. I look at that outside, and as I told you before, I had a fellow on the inside. He said the inside is really beautiful, okay? So, I mean, do we really need bonds? Again, I want to bring up the idea of bonds and loans. Debt, it's an old thing. We don't want debt. We don't want to pass that on. That's not a way of this. We fund as we go. We look for the emergencies that we have to do, and if it's not an emergency, stop it. It's just a change that I'm hoping. And I read a letter to the editor by a banker and Citizens banker in the Journal, and he says so many of us are not financial. We're not good at finance. We're just not good. We didn't learn that. I don't think we learn enough in high school, and unless you're a finance major, I don't think you'll learn enough even in college. So we're not really tuned in to being careful with money, how to invest it, spend it. So I think we need a change, and at least we can start with the change on our spending habits. You know, this credit card idea, bonds, credit card, mortgages, I think that's a start. So I want to get that in your head somehow, that we just should not spend money unless it's an emergency. Thank you.
Thank you. Looks like there's no further comment. Someone can make a motion to close the public hearing?
I'll make that motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Now turn over to Mr. Chorney and the Finance Committee for a Finance Committee report on the town's annual budget and pension OPEB situation. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having us. We know it's been a very long and challenging process for everybody, and I think we would all echo what's been said so far about all the hard work that the town manager, the town finance director, the school superintendent, school finance director, and really everybody has put in so far over the budget process to try to get it to a point to keep everybody happy, which in any town is probably very hard to do. But they've done a lot so far, and what we'd like to do tonight is just come back to you as a finance committee and give you an update on where we see the town relative to its pension and OPEB costs. If you recall, and for those in the audience, we had a workshop back in March of 2013 with the town council, which was our first to really bring forward the challenges, the issues and the challenges regarding the town's pension and OPEB costs. So we thought we would take this opportunity during the budget process and as early as possible to give you our thoughts on the pension and OPEB costs and how they impact not only this budget, but potentially, but budgets potentially in the future. And so you don't have to listen to me all the time, which I know everybody's probably tired of. A couple of folks from the Finance Committee will be helping out. Bill Moylan will be getting up here in a moment to talk about what we see as our view as to the results of the pension, of the fire and police current negotiated contracts. And then Mark Abrams will come up. He's our GASB, or Governmental Accounting Standard Board expert, and he will, hopefully in layperson's term, which is very hard to do, just give you, spend just a couple of minutes on how all these numbers really are determined. Because that's something I think that's never really has been done, and it's really just an education process for everybody, and again, try to do it in layperson's term. So with that, let me just go through very quickly just some of the things that have happened since our workshop. The new the fire and police contracts have been approved. They did result in some changes to pension and OPEB benefits. Bill will talk about those in a moment. The town manager and town finance director, along with myself and Dr. Vangermesh met with the Department of Revenue to learn what others in the state are doing in these areas to try to address and get under control the pension and OPEB costs. And we thought we'd also just bring you up to date on a GASB exposure draft for OPEB accounting and reporting. I know this is accounting stuff, which can get a little dry, but it is going to be important, and you'll see what the impact will be on the town, at least from an accounting perspective, on a proposal related to OPEB. So with that, let me turn it over to Bill, and he'll take you through our view as to the contracts that were recently negotiated.
Thank you, Harris. Hello, everyone. Go back. Here we go. First, we wanted to talk about the contracts from last year with police and fire. And as you'll see on our headline, new contracts continue to be unsustainable. There was some small progress made on the OPEB side. Unfortunately, on the pension side, the ARC continues to go up. When you take a look at both of them together now, and we'll show you this later, combined, they're about $11.2 million per year in annual costs. Again, on the committee, we look at it as one cost, both OPEB and pension. Not all changes in the 2013 approved funding improvement plan were implemented. Primarily, no changes were made to the current retiree benefits. And you'll note that the ARC after the new police and fire contract is $5.6 million, $2.3 million higher than what was agreed to under the funding improvement plan. So obviously certain changes were not made that should have been made per the funding improvement plan. And unfortunately, we don't think that the current contracts that are being negotiated, that the gap will be closed significantly, which is what we feel has to happen. One real-life example that Don Goodrich put together, person who retired a couple of years ago now at age 47. This person, we're assuming, lives to age 80, will receive $2.1 million in pension benefits and another almost $1.1 million in OPEB. So one single employee will receive over $3 million during his lifetime. Next page is just quickly what some other towns have done. There are others that are addressing the same issues that we're taking a look at, and others that have already addressed these issues. But we just wanted to show you a few of their results and some of the things that they are doing. I'll now turn it over to Mark, who will explain how actuaries calculate liabilities in layperson's terms. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Good evening. This slide speaks to the 3 steps that an actuary conducts in doing a pension and/or an OPEB valuation. The actuary will come in and project cash flows for benefits. So you heard Bill earlier mention someone receiving benefits through age 80. So the actuary will come in and project those benefits through age 80 for people that are on the plans. Then the actuary will take that number and discount it to today's present value. And then through actuarial cost methods, allocate that present value of future benefits to several accounting periods. And those accounting periods can be displayed through a timeline. So picture somebody coming in at age 25 and working 15 years to today. So I'm going to go with age 40 of that employee as today. So the employee has worked 15 years, projects to retire 22 years later, but the benefits that he or she will receive go out to age 80. So what is known is this 15-year period, but this 40-year period is all projections conducted by the actuary. So let's see how this works. So age 25 is when the person comes on board. Age 40 is the present age. Age 62 is the assumed age at retirement. So the service period that that person will work is between age 25 and 62. the life expectancy is year 80. Isn't that cool? So the projected benefits go from age 62 to age 80, discounted to today to get to the present value. And then right there, that's today's normal cost. But these projected benefits discounted to today are then allocated through a cost method to several accounting periods. This is what's called the past service cost. And then we have future normal costs. So basically, that's what the actuary does. In terms that you have heard, today's normal cost plus part of this past service cost is the ARC, the annual required contribution. And that's what the FIP is trying to get us to 100%. We're now 59, 60%, going to 80% in this proposed budget. Harris?
Thanks, Mark. Does anybody have any questions on that? We just want to give you sort of an overview. We will sign you all up for the actuarial exams that are coming up next later on this year. Anybody have any questions? Okay. Let me just clarify one thing that Bill said when he mentioned that, back here very quickly, when he said the FIP, the last two bullets, the second and third to last bullets, where we said that if you remember the FIP that you approved last year, you approved a FIP that really had a scenario for 4 different options. And when you looked at the ARC under each one of those options, which was, I believe, prepared by Nyhart, when you look at the average of all those ARCs, they averaged about $3.3 million. So that's what Bill was saying. When you take the average of all the ARCs of the funding improvement plan that you approved, the ARC should be around $3.3 million. As Bill said, it's 5.6 for this year, 2.3 million higher. Again, admittedly, it doesn't include the municipal employees, which are currently being negotiated, so that would have hopefully some impact. We just don't think it has that will have such a big impact that it will reduce that gap. So I just wanted to clarify that. And now let me just go to talk about where the pension and OPEB costs came out. A lot of numbers on here. I won't focus on them all, but the ARC, as Bill said, the ARC for the pension actually went up year over year, not by a big amount, and I suppose if there's any silver lining, that's the silver lining. The increases that are expected in future years will not be as significant as they have been in the past, but they still did go up. And primarily because not a lot of changes were made, if any, to retiree benefits, which has a big piece of the past service cost. Let me then just jump down to what's in red, so the second line from the bottom, where you have the unfunded accrued liability. Again, actually went up by a couple of $1 million. Again, it's a function partly of the value of the fund assets, but also a function of the accrued liability going up 5.4%. So that's where you get to the funded ratio, about 57%, 57.6%, and the critical status that the town manager and finance director are trying to address, along with the town council. OPEB's a little different story, which is certainly positive. The ARC actually went down about 12%. Several changes made in the pension and fire negotiations. Again, does not reflect anything that may happen with the municipal employee group that's going on, negotiations that are going on now. Again, good news is it went down. The question is did it go down enough? Could it have gone down further? The unfunded accrued liability, as we all know, there isn't much in terms of a fund asset relative to OPEBs. So you're still talking about an unfunded accrued liability of close to $62 million just for OPEB. When you combine them all, and again, we being the Finance Committee, we feel very strongly that these costs should be looked at together. We understand why the pension is being looked at separately because of this whole critical status aspect. We understand that from the state perspective, but there's only one way to look at these costs, and that's one benefit, one set of benefit costs. That includes pension and OPEB. So we combine them, and we continue to strongly urge everyone to look at it from that perspective. And when you look at it, the ARC 14, fiscal 14 over 13, again, went down a little bit by about 5%, driven primarily by the OPEB costs. The unfunded accrued liability, again, the unfunded accrued liability also went down by about 8%. But that's a percentage. The real number is the $105 million. It's still a large, large number, which, whether we like it or not, represents an obligation like any other obligation that this town has. Any questions at this point? There was some discussion initially about, in terms of what was being proposed as a budget, and in that proposal there was it was proposed that there be an annual increase of 3.99% in property taxes that would help fund the 80% of the pension ARC, which the town manager and the finance director thought appropriately so to get out of critical status, that was important. So we know now that that's the 3.99% is not happening. We understand it's now 2 point, whatever it is, in the 2.3, 2.4 range. But what the purpose of this slide was really to show what the town is giving up. This slide and I think it's the next slide. What's the town giving up now and in the future? So the left-hand side of the bar, the yellowish color, that's the pension ARC. That's strictly the pension ARC. The next line, that represents the fund contribution, the pension fund contribution that will be in for this year, which is 4.936, and then assuming every year after that the pension ARC is funded 100%. The light blue bar really talks about capital improvements, and the town manager talked a lot about capital improvements in discussion that's been happening with the town council over the last couple of weeks and department heads regarding to, in essence, defer capital improvements. So what happens is what was originally in the budget, and again, I know this has changed even from because of tonight's early meeting, the workshop session, but originally what's in the budget for this year was $1.1 million in terms of general fund contributions to capital improvements. In order, next year, what was in the budget in the 5-year capital improvement plan was $3.7 million. The only amount, the amount that could be funded for capital improvements, everything else being equal, next year being 2015-16, would only be $1 million. And then the year after that, what was in the 5-year 2016-17, what was in the 5-year improvement capital improvement plan was $3.667 million. The only excess amount of funds that would be available after, in other words, taking the 3.99% property tax increase and reducing it for the pension funding, would be $2 million. So you see what's happened is that ultimately these capital improvement plans get deferred. And in this scenario, it doesn't even talk about improving the OPEB position. This is strictly the pension side. So we just wanted to show you that what happens is, here's one of the consequences of funding an unsustainable amount. And then another consequence is education. And this isn't meant to pick on education or anything like that. A lot of wonderful things, which I think the Finance Committee would agree have been happening over there in terms of certainly not only the education, but the financing. The superintendent talked about their funding, how they, in essence, funded the $700,000 in additional non-teacher pension costs that were allocated this year to the education budget. They did that in part by reducing capital projects. The education department right now it has approximately 3.1 fund surplus balance. If everything being equal, and there was no change in the pension benefits in non-teacher pension costs, and assuming that the town council level funded the education department for the next 5 or 6 years, that fund surplus that the education has will be depleted by the year 2018-19. We'll have a little bit left in 2019-20. And at that time, either the school will have to come up with additional $700,000 in revenue, either through town council support, or they'll have to cut costs. The whole purpose of this slide was really just to show that this is going to be another impact. Here's an area on services where there could be a major impact, not necessarily this year, if you will, although going into next year, you saw capital projects being reduced. But there will be an impact going forward. Any questions on this? Okay. If the town wanted to fund the OPEB ARC and pension ARC 100%, it would take 6 years of annual 3.99% property tax increases. No increases of capital and capital improvements, so it would be about $1 million every year for the next 6 years to fully fund the ARC and pension. So I think that hopefully really drives home the challenge that we all have really in trying to address these issues. I didn't want to step back, by the way. The pension ARC this is interest of transparency, the pension ARC that's being used in these slides comes from the FIP. The FIP, the pension ARC, actually has come down from what was submitted to the FIP. When you look at the valuation, because of the the fire and police, the pension ARC actually came down. There's about $300,000 difference between what was shown in the FIP and what's actually is the ARC. So I did want to show you that we're using a little higher pension ARC here, but the numbers are directionally correct. Anybody, any questions on this?
I have a question. Even with the funding, we're talking about 6 years, right?
Yes.
To fund both the
Approximately, yes.
OPEB and the ARC. The regular pension, I mean.
Yeah, and a lot of that's because of the OPEB.
That's at 3.99%. That's what your calculation
Yes,
is.
that's using a 3.99% property tax increase, and it does assume.
And that's not even touching any of your capital improvement.
Well, what
budget.
happens is your capital improvements would be at the same
Disappears.
level they are today, $1 million.
How can we operate a town in this manner? How can we operate the town of Narragansett without a capital improvement budget? How do we do that?
I think it would be very difficult.
And I think during all of our contract not contract, our pension, our budget discussions, we're taking 50,000 here and 10,000 there, and the bottom line is, if this is the real number, the 3.99% projected out for the next 6 years, we're just doing more damage by coming in at the lower number. A lot more damage. We're increasing that OPEB commitment and the pension commitment because we're not making them. And that's pretty sad. It's not a happy scene. I don't see the positive side of this thing that the manager somewhat described a little while ago. I don't see that because I don't see how the school can operate with those budget restraints, and I certainly don't see how the town can operate with those capital improvements. I just can't see how it can work. And that's the truth. And I think those are the numbers that we need to be looking at. And we can kick the can down the road like we have for the last 21 years or more, 25 years maybe. And it's just going to get worse.
Doug, if I could just give this a shot, Harris, I think that picture is intended to demonstrate, Doug, not solely assumption around a tax rate increase, but also if you do nothing to reduce the OPEB liability, I think what I heard you say is most of that is driven by the OPEB liability, right?
Yes.
So by virtue of contract negotiations, if we do nothing to reduce the OPEB liability, it will take that duration at that rate to satisfy the $61 million in unfunded liability.
There's also, I'm sorry, Glenn, but pension also, the unfunded pension still plays a major role in this.
No doubt, no doubt.
And I understand that.
So we can pull two levers is, I guess, the point that I'm trying to make.
I understand that, but the bottom line is you need the cash. You need the money.
I'm not suggesting we don't need money, but...
You need the money. And at the end of the day, that's what happens, and the consequences are, your capital improvements of the town fall apart. Like Matt's touched on earlier about the highways, and James said the same thing about, don't maintain your highways and see what it's gonna cost. We only have to look at the school department as an example for the $22 million bond we had to appropriate to fix the schools that we neglected for the, kept cutting their budget, their capital improvement budgets for years and years before that, and it all caught up with us. We're in a place now in Narragansett where we're up against the wall. It's at the end of the road, the way I see it. And I've been listening, and I've been trying to get excited, and I'm kind of like wishing that I was hearing some more positive things and better things. And I don't see it, and I haven't heard it. And that's where we are. Some of the things I do hear about bond referendums and things, it's all well and good, and we should have the money to do those things. We don't, because of these pension issues. But for all these bond referendums and all these pie-in-the-sky ideas that we're having, my next question is, how are we going to pay for it? And nobody offers that solution. Nobody. And it isn't about dump trucks or anything else. My whole point is it's an attitude we have here. The school department comes in at 48 cents on our tax dollar, and the municipal side is 52 cents. Something's wrong there. And while I'm at it, and I'm going to be quiet because I don't want to take a whole lot of time here, congratulations to the superintendent of schools and her and Karen there for doing such a fine job handling their budget. I just wish the municipal side was had the same credibility.
To put it in a little different perspective, and again, this assumes this 3.99% property tax increase. This is what the impact, and it somehow didn't come out this way, but the impact on the homeowner. If you increased property taxes at a clip of 3.99%, it would result in an increase of 31% starting in fiscal 2012-13. If you started this year, maybe about 28%. But that's what would happen. The property taxes, a property tax bill on an average $300,000 assessed home would go up 32%, 31%. Again, this is making assumptions that it's 3.99%. We understand that. But if you really wanted to fund it, that's what it would take. And that's why we as a committee have been saying that these costs are just not sustainable.
That's the other issue that I have too. Your report saying that the pension, you're suggesting that the pension's not sustainable.
And the OPEB, both.
It's not sustainable. Why would we put any more money into this system if it's not sustainable? Why would we do that? Why would we take $5 million, $6 million a year and throw it into a system that's non-sustainable? It's going to fail at some point. Why would we do that?
Let me, Mark's going to just spend just a minute on some new accounting that's coming up that you thought you might be interested as to what the impact would be.
Thank you, Harris. We've thrown a lot of numbers at you this evening. This slide presents what's on your financial statements. There are many financial statements contained in the town's CAFR. The statement of net assets or net position is the one I'm referring to here. At June 30, 13, the town had net assets of $123 million. That's all of its assets less all of its liabilities, results in $123 million balance. But this balance does not consider the OPEB and pension unfunded liability. It's a different accounting mechanism where this recognizes the financing of the OPEB and the pension obligations. This is going to change on the financial statements. Beginning in fiscal 15, that's the budget you are now deliberating on passing and reviewing. The pensions are the pension unfunded accrued liability is going to be presented on the face of the financial statement. in fiscal 17 or 18, the GASB exposure draft for OPEB will have the same impact, where the unfunded OPEB actuarial liability will appear on the face of the financial statements. So we saw the 115 million earlier on one slide. That will then take the fund balance for 13, and albeit this will be for 15 and 17 or 18-ish, and literally take 123 million down to roughly $8 million. So we see impacts in several places. This is the anticipated impact on the town's financial statement of net assets. Thank you.
And just to make it clear, that's not the general fund balance that we're talking about. That's, as Mark said, you take all the assets, this building that we're in, all the assets that we have, minus all the liabilities that we had at June 30, 13. Then you tack on these two unfunded amounts, and you see the result. It pretty much takes us down to a very low amount, but unrelated to the general fund balance. Still brings us down quite a small number. Any questions? So what do we see as the cost of not making significant changes to the benefit plans? This is a summary of not doing anything. We think the cost of the contracts that are recently approved continue to be unsustainable. We understand this is not an easy thing. We know that. We know it's not easy to agree to get cuts that have been promised in the past. We understand that. But it's because of that these contracts continue to be unsustainable. As we said, property tax increases of at least 3.99% would be needed just for the next 2 years to get us out of the pension arc, to fully fund the pension arc. And then fully funding the pension and OPEB arc will require 5 to 6 years. The impact of these tax increases, I mean, we've seen them already, whether they would defer capital improvement over several years or likely impact services. I know we're confident that the town manager and department heads and education will do everything they can to provide us the services that the residents are looking for. But ultimately, if you have to cut these costs, sooner or later you can't get blood from a stone, and there's just so much you can do. So that's sort of the cost of not doing anything with these benefit plans. Here's our recommendations, and put them in two colors. The ones in black are ones that we made in the March 2013 work session, and the ones in red, however that shows up, are sort of newer ones or maybe expanding on the old ones. First off, we again strongly urge the town council to consider the pension and OPEB costs on a combined basis in view as a single benefit cost for active employees, vested, and retirees. We think that the number should be a sustainable number, and that's always up for definition. What's a sustainable number? And you could throw out a lot of metrics, and we talked about this back in March, the metrics that we looked at, and you could probably argue a lot of different metrics. We thought, for now anyhow, that a metric where the total annual required contributions for both pension and ARC, for both pension and OPEBs, should not exceed 0.1% of the town's property value assessments. So that, in today's dollars, would be about $4.6 million, around there. What we did add, though, we said up until such time as those past service costs are fully funded. Past service costs, as Mark said, are a big piece of any ARC, and once those past service costs are fully funded, it will reduce the ARC. Once those past service costs are fully funded, we think the metric should be reevaluated, and there may be a better metric to look at. We also think that the metric may also need to be evaluated once the Governmental Accounting Standard Board comes out over this pension and OPEB accounting changes, once those are adopted. That may change the way actuaries do things and the way things are accounted for. So, again, we think they should be funded 100%, not to exceed that 0.1% of property value assessments. What do we think you need, will be required to meet those sustainable cost levels? Several items, all of which I think we discussed at March work session. The current retiree invested benefits, that is the COLA and health benefits, need to be changed. That's probably the biggest opportunity right now for the largest savings. We saw with the police and fire, you did make some changes, changes were agreed to with the COLA suspension, but that was going forward.
no impact on retirees. And again, that's why you didn't see a big impact on the ARC relative to pension and fire. But that is the opportunity for the largest savings. Again, we know that's very difficult to try to change something that's been promised. As Bill pointed out, there are several communities in this state, some of which were not taken over by the state, that have that have changed their benefits, that impacted retirees also. So it can be done. It's been shown to be done. We think that all active employees' pension benefits should be adjusted, not just those hired or retired after a certain date. When you look at the pension of the police and fire, and I'm not trying to pick on police and fire, but that's the latest contract that's been, that has been approved. So we're not trying to pick on them. That's the only thing we have as a base right now, if you will. When you look at that, I think what it was is those people who were hired prior to June 2013, their accrual rate in terms of pension benefits stayed the same, whereas those hired after 2013, they were reduced. That's fine. That's a good way to go, to reduce the accrual benefit. But if you're doing it for new hires, it doesn't have that significant of an impact right away on the ARCs. So we think everybody sort of should be treated in the same way as much as possible. We do think, and a lot has been talked about this, and some towns have done this in the past, I mean recently I should say, begin to think about moving away from defined benefit plans to defined contributions. That won't necessarily have a big impact today in terms of an ARC, but certainly as years go by, and you run off the pension benefits under a defined benefit plan and you go to a 401k type plan, then you're sort of minimizing your risk at that point. We think on the OPEB side, consolidate health plan offerings. We heard when we met with the state that one way towns are reducing their OPEB benefits are reducing the number of benefit plans that are offered by health insurance carriers, whereas we may have, I think it is 5 or 4, I'm not certain how many it is. Take a look at going down to 1 or 2, reducing those number of plans, offerings. We talked about having several of our retirees that currently continue to be on the town's health insurance benefits, were never rolled into Medicare. We know to do that there is a penalty. Not certain. I think the town financial director, you went through it. I think you thought the penalty was pretty steep. Is there another way? And we haven't really looked at. I can't sit here and say we have a suggestion for you. If you don't roll them into Medicare, what do you do? But that's something that we would certainly be happy to look at. But we think again that's a fairly large cost, and is this something that could be done in that area also? Exploring use of monthly subsidies for health benefits tied into HSA type accounts is another area where towns and city municipalities are looking at it. We talked about outsourcing. Our good friend and colleague on the committee, Dr. Vangamesh, raised this, outsourcing areas where benefits exceed the cost. One of the areas, again, not to pick on it, but that has come up and we certainly would agree should be looked at, is a non-teacher in education pension and OPEB ARC. I will say that says 16%. I think that should be more 14%. That's a typo. But the point is, non-teacher education pension and OPEB ARC is 14% of the total. Doesn't make sense to look at an outsourcing arrangement in that area, along with others. We're not just saying that's the only one. That's just an example that we're talking about. We think the next three are, we had talked about these, but I don't think we necessarily specified these in the workshop. We think it would be very beneficial if you could align all union contract dates such that all contracts end at the same time. This way you're negotiating with unions, all unions at the same time, so that if you're not negotiating with one union and approve certain benefits, then the next union is trying to get the same thing. So we think if it's at all possible, align all union contract dates such that all contracts end at the same time. Right now, there's about, I think, a 2-year difference. I think what it comes down to between fire and police and municipal. We believe that active employees and retirees, when meetings are held, should be presented with the total annual sustainable cost. In other words, here is an amount that the town believes is sustainable, and present that to the unions and retirees and let them know what we have to spend. I sort of relate it to some extent. It may not be the best analogy, but you're talking about sports. Teams have salary caps now. All the players know what the salary caps are. Okay? And then the last thing may be obvious, but we do think that active employees, vested individuals, and retirees really need to be educated about the impact of these unsustainable costs. To that end, we would be happy. And again, I know the town manager, the finance director, and others are looking to do this. If there's anything we can do to help out in that situation, we'd be happy to help out. That's it with the pension side. I just wanted to add one more slide, which actually is not in your package that I sent out, that really gives you our conclusions about the proposed budget. But let me just stop for a second. Anything? We're not trying to make it, we're not trying to be downers, but we're just trying to state the facts. There have been some things that have changed, which certainly went in the right direction, as OPEB with the police and fire. Do more substantial changes have to be made? I think that's what it comes down to. And the timing of those. Some towns and municipalities in the state seem to have been able to do this and address this over a couple of year period, and not 5 or 10 years, or not 4 years. And I think that's what we are looking. That's what we, as a committee, are strongly urging the town council to provide the guidance to the town manager how to get this done sooner than later. So I'll stop there on the OPEB and pension, and then just give you our very quick summary of where we see the budget. The budget, when we met, the Finance Committee met, I guess a couple of weeks ago, 2 or 3 weeks ago now, that's when the budget was being initially rolled out at a 3.99% tax increase. Obviously, that's not happening now, as we heard earlier today, and we again commend the town manager, town finance director, on all their efforts to trying to reduce the impact on the tax increase. But we still think, and when we met, we thought a more appropriate tax increase would be in the 2% area. So you're at around 2.3, 2.4. We can say we oppose it, and that's probably what we'd say. It's certainly a lot better than 3.99. The biggest thing, and maybe Doug, this is what, to your point, the biggest concern and biggest thing that we have with the budget is the amounts that are being funded for the pension and the OPEB. Again, we applaud what the town manager and finance director are trying to do, but we just think what's being funded are unsustainable amounts. And I think that's the biggest challenge that you have. So in the end, I think what we're saying is we still believe the property tax increase is too high. We support the 100% funding of the pension and OPEB ARCs, but at sustainable amounts. And we believe the amounts being funded in total are not sustainable. The other issues that we haven't talked about, we talked about the last 2 bullets here, deferral of capital improvements, possible impact on services. The third bullet hasn't gotten a lot of discussion, I think in public anyhow, and that's the enterprise funds. When you look at the enterprise funds, particularly the major ones, the unrestricted balances continue to decline. And if you looked at it on an annual run rate, what's being appropriated in the budget for several of the larger enterprise funds like water and sewer and wastewater, if you use those as a run rate, the water, for example, would run out of their unrestricted fund balance in about 1.5 years. Wastewater, I think, is about 4.5 years. So what that's going to mean, I think we already heard it, we're talking about fee increases. Just another burden along with the property tax increase that the resident in Narragansett will have to deal with. With that, that's all we have.
Any questions or comments for Mr. Chorney and the Finance Committee? The council or the public? Mr. Wojciechowski.
Thank you, Harris.
I want to thank you so much for the alert that you're giving the town on financial disaster. I just have one question, and I've asked it before, and I'm a little confused on the smoothing rate. NIHART uses 7.5% smoothing return to justify the numbers, and I've always had a problem with that because, this year we've had a fantastic time with the stock market and all, but I think if you look at the lost decade in our stock market issue, I don't know how that relates to NIHART's presentation based on 7.5%. Suppose it's going to be 6%, which sounds more realistic. do these numbers get much worse? And that smoothing rate gets to 6% rather than at 7.5%.
Yeah, the numbers, as Mark pointed out, in terms of a discount, that would be used, that the actuaries would use. If in fact it had to be a 6%, the numbers would be higher. Your unfunded would be higher. 7.5%, 7.5% is, I think, a number that's commonly used right now. And I'm not an investment expert, so over the last 20, 30 years, whether it's 7.5%, that's the whole idea, that it takes a long-range view of investment performance. I will say, though, when you get back to the GASB pronouncements, the proposals, that concept potentially goes away. And that's where funding will come into play. In that, in effect, if you're not funding at certain levels, and I won't get into the whole technical side of this, if you don't fund at certain levels, that is one thing that the accountants and the actuaries will look at that will drive down potentially your discount rate. So that if you're not funding at an appropriate level, your discount rate may go from 7.5% to 4% and then just drive up your unfunded. I won't get into technicalities of it, but that's out there.
They use NIHOT, but are there other people other than NIHOT that have other numbers? Is NIHOT, I get a feeling that NIHOT is authorized by the state or supported by the state or state approved, or there is no, again, I would like to see 3 different views on what that should be. And why did we pick NIHOT? And why was NIHOT the one and not some other company or some other person to evaluate that?
I can't answer why NIHOT was selected. My guess is if you got 3 actuaries in the room, when you're talking about a discount rate, they'd probably talk about, in this environment still, 7.5%. This is what you're probably going to say. I don't think anybody's out there using 4% or 3%. Mark, I don't know if you've seen it any differently from a discount rate. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Vengermish.
While I'm on the Finance Committee, these are my thoughts on it. One of them is in relation to what Pam had said about our vision of ourselves and our vision of West Warwick. And we don't like to talk about Narragansett and West Warwick in the same sentence. But when it comes to OPEB, and this is before West Warwick changed its plans a couple of weeks ago, we were tied for about the worst. We ranked, West Warwick was the 7th worst in one statistic. We were the 4th worst. And another statistic, West Warwick was the 5th worst in OPEB. We were the 7th. Now, West Warwick did it. Now, I would imagine their pension, unfunded pension percent was probably higher than ours. But we were the same as West Warwick. But West Warwick changed it 3 weeks ago. If West Warwick can do it, we can do it. And it's time. Now, I've said many times, ultimately, we have promised too much to too many for too long a time period, an ever-increasing time period. In fact, I think anybody who works for Narragansett already automatically gains 5 years of extended life. Now, we have basic problems here. We don't want to hear about hurting our retirees. They're our chums. We don't want to touch them, and they really are laughing at us. And they don't realize that we have power to do something. You people have power to do something with retirees. One word is COLA. It is clear that court decisions have allowed towns to remove COLAs. It's certainly true in Rhode Island. We do have power. We don't want to hear we have great economic power about prospective employees. We do. We are the best employer in the state of Rhode Island, and we think we're not. We think we have to compete for prospective employees. They're here waiting to come here for this chum-chum-cheree Narragansett. The answer is a defined contribution plan. This is incomprehensible to me, how we can hire new employees on a defined benefit plan that we know is killing us, and we don't want to do it. I know behaviorally, you hate to have two classes of firemen, policemen, and other workers, and you want to treat them all the same, new or old. But that's the chum system. The federal government did away with this years ago. It mind boggles me. And our retirees, I've gotten a few calls, tell us about the implicit, implied contract relationship. And that's an important legal concept. But there is another important legal concept, bankruptcy. And as Doug has pointed out, if we're going to go bankrupt, if we do go bankrupt, it'll be on OPEB. It will be because of skyrocketing medical costs, which I think are more likely than not. Heaven forbid, let's go bankrupt now and don't go through all this contributions. And I say to the retirees, please don't bring us to that state. And remember that there's one legal concept for an implicit contract for retirees, but there is another legal concept of bankruptcy, and this is not good. And I say again, as I mentioned before, we have now planned liabilities, long-term debt of, let's say, $140 million. And all I can tell you about that is, wow, that's $60 million for OPEB, $45 for pensions, $21 current, the roads at $17, the jail, and why we want to spend money to benefit prisoners, I don't know, $2 million. The field, the school, 1.5, the library, let's say 4.5, that's $141 million ready to go. And I'll save some of the other comments that may be regarded as rude. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions, concerns? Just want to thank Mr. Chorney and the Finance Committee for your attention. It's not a pretty picture, but we will deal with it. I think Ms. Kenyon and Ms. Nolan are going to address this in the coming months and years, and that's the best step we can take at this point. It's not going to be overnight, but it will be done. So that's the plan.
Sounds like a good one.
Thank you very much, everyone. Have a good night.
Thanks.